Okay, in this video, what I'm going to be doing is installing a NAS system called Rockstor. And so basically I'm going to be installing it using into the virtual machine, a Qemu virtual machine. And before I install it, I'll just mention one thing, and that is if you try to install it and your virtual machine software gives it a device which isn't SCSI, then basically what happens, you'll find that the install won't work because they've hard coded it. The script they use to bootstrap the install expects the device to be SDA, so you have to make sure that it's whatever drive your virtual machine exports to the Rockstor install shows up as SDA. At the moment, you see I've got it selected as virt.io, but that's not going to work because that comes up as I think it's VDA, and because it's not SDA, it basically stops it from working. So instead I have to install it as without virt.io, so that it comes up as SDA and the install will work. Okay, so let's get this started. So just choose install. Okay, and this install is basically, it's just CentOS 7 that they've used a kickstart script with. So the only thing you have to put in is the password, but it'll name everything else. Okay, so that's finished. So basically we're just going to reboot. Okay, so now you just log in with that root password that you set up in the installer. And the only thing we really care about is finding out what the IP address is. And one thing about CentOS 7 is that they removed a lot of the useful networking tools that were in the older versions. And one of those is ifconfig. So if you want to know what the IP address is, then rather than trying to fight with the other tools, what I'll do is just install it, because the old ways were the simpler ways, but they want you to go for the more complicated tools that are used nowadays. They seem to think that the more complicated the better. Okay, so that's the IP address. So now we don't actually need this anymore, because once we've got that IP, we can then go into the web interface. Okay, so you can only, basically HTTP doesn't work, it's only HTTPS that allows you to get in there. Well, it'd be nice, but it doesn't really help. So here we are in the web interface, and it does actually look quite fancy. So I think they got all the funny the animated graphs. That idea is from Synology. So yeah, it does have some interesting looking stuff on it. But now the main thing that you're going to be using it for is to install a to set up the shares. So what you have to do is get into the menu system, and basically the way you have to do it is first you have to allocate the storage. So you've got the disks, and you've got a default pool which has been set up as well, but that pool, yeah, so that pool, and it's actually BTRFS as well, which is the interesting thing about it. But of course, you now have to put shares onto the pool. So at the moment, there's a couple there, which are like the default ones. So basically, we have to create another share. And then what you do is, see, the pool is the size of your whatever the main drive is that you have your pool on. So there's only one pool at the moment. So if you add another drive, then that would create another pool. And what you do is each share, you allocate how much storage the share uses up, which is actually quite nice. Rather than you having to make the partitions yourself first, you can just dynamically give it a size, and then so you know that share is going to use that much space, but no more. And I presume, well, I haven't tried it yet, but I presume you can increase that size and change it later on, but we'll soon we'll find out maybe at a later date. So that creates the share. So we have the share there now, and it's a 40 gig share. But once you create the share, nothing can access it, because you have to actually allow the actual the file sharing services to access to each share. So once you go into the services, you might find that they're actually off. Yeah, it looks like they're off by default. So the first thing you got to do is turn it on, and then you have to add a Samba export. And then so you choose which share you want it to sort of export. And then you've got the options whether it's browsable. And if you don't care about security, you can just say that it's guest only, and then make sure that the read-onlys know, so that they can actually write to the share. And you can add any sort of extra Samba parameters here if you want. It seems you can also turn on shadow copy as well, so I presume it's must be using Samba 4, but for the time being we won't be using that. So now basically we've got the share, and then Samba is enabled. So what that means is we should actually be able to access that now. So if you go into Windows machine that I've got handy, okay, so in here what we do is try to map a network drive and just give it a letter. The easiest thing is to see if we can see it in the browsing list. Because if not, then we'll have to put the IP address in. Okay, looks like it's not there. It seems like it should be showing up there. So let me just check to see. Okay, that's another thing about this. It seems there isn't that much configuration, so I suppose that can be a good or bad thing. Okay, so seems like the guest isn't working. Okay, let me just check. I just want to see if there's a way of getting it to okay, well, for some reason it's not, doesn't seem to be showing up this time. There's a few left over. Okay, well, because last time it did, but anyway, let's just get this over with. So the way to be sure that it's going to work is just to use the IP address. So if you just do and then basically just put in the admin password that you set up, and there you go. So that's the share. It's empty at the moment, but just to be sure that we can access it. And then so there, so we can copy stuff to it. So that's as easy as it gets, really. You don't have to mess with any config files, and Rockstor just basically works for setting up shares out of the box. And I'm just going to say that even better is the fact that I tried this with FreeNAS, and when it seems like FreeNAS are basically being too clever, because when you set up the share, you think everything's fine, but then it's read-only, and you're there having to fight it. And it seems that the way to get it to be read-write is you have to do it from the command line, which is kind of pointless, because what you want is obviously something where you can just quickly set up a share and job's done. And for some reason FreeNAS seem to think that they decided to be too clever to I suppose they'll say it's in the aims of security, but it just makes it kind of useless, really. So that's just a quick initial demonstration of Rockstor to show how easy it is to set things up on it, and I'll be doing a bit more testing with it to see what other features it has in as well. Okay, see you in the next video. Okay, bye.